Welcome to Edinburgh, Scotland, here on my Mercury line. It's me, Helena from HelenaWoods.com, traveling the world full-time and bringing you the latest astrology knowledge as I experience my astrocartography and bring the stories to you on my podcast, Cosmic Compass. Now today we're talking about something a little different than astrocartography. We're talking about the financial astrology markets and how we can learn more about our finances from our birth chart. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to the Cosmic Compass podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and make sure you download my free cheat sheet, which you can find down below in this description. Let's get started. I am in Edinburgh, Scotland, on my Mercury line. Speaking of Mercury, we should talk about Mercury when it comes to financial astrology. As we learned in our recent episode with Susan Goodell on the podcast, Cosmic Compass, my astrology podcast, which you can find on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, we learned that Mercury represents stock indexes, markets, trading, and coins. When we're talking about money, a lot of us think about Venus, a planet that represents resources and money. But Mercury is the hidden secret that not a lot of people consider. Now there's a couple other parts of the chart that we really want to look at, but if we have an out of bounds Mercury, or a Mercury that's really well placed, for example, Mercury in Gemini or Virgo, or perhaps we have Mercury in a good house. The good houses in astrology are the angular houses, 1, 10, 7, 4, or the houses of good fortune, the 5th house, and the houses of good spirit, the 11th house. But come, let's go walk around Edinburgh and talk a little bit about some of the other signs when it comes to financial astrology that we need to be paying attention to. There are 2 houses in astrology that have to deal with money, but there's 2 that you probably didn't know about, and so we're going to go into that also today. Now, the second house is the house called the Gate of Hades in Hellenistic astrology. And yes, my name is Helena, pronounced like Hellenistic astrology. I do love Hellenistic astrology. I switched over to whole sign and Hellenistic techniques in 2020 when a lot of Hellenistic astrologers accurately predicted the pandemic, and I've never been the same ever since. Anyway, the second house is the Gate of Hades. So this has to do with your income, your money that you make, that you spend, you budget, you save, but it's also how you go out into the world and make money. What goods and services do you have to provide? But the other house in astrology is other people's money. And this is big on the investments and the markets. And this is the idle place in Hellenistic astrology. And the idle place is the 8th house, which is also a big money house. We think about traders, we think of people who invest, we think about the markets, we think about our partner's money, our joint finances together, our debt, taxes, inheritance, talking about the 8th house. But when we're looking at our own charts, what we want to do is we want to look to what zodiac sign is coloring our 2nd and 8th house, and also where is the ruling planet in our chart that rules over the 2nd and 8th house. For instance, I got Sagittarius in the 2nd house of money. So the way my relationship with money, my relationship to spending and saving is very Sagittarius. I spend all my money on travel and knowledge. I'm always buying books and courses, and I'm traveling the world, right? I also have a very abundant mindset around money. I always have, even when I was broke my whole life. I've always had a very Jupiter. There's always more money to go around. Somehow we'll make it. We'll figure out a way. You know, that's very Sagittarius. But come over here. I want you to see the flowers. Look at these beautiful cherry blossoms here in Edinburgh, Scotland on my Mercury line. Aren't these beautiful? Also, we want to look to the planet that rules Sagittarius, right? So we'd look to Jupiter. And Jupiter's in my 1st house on my ascendant. So there can be a lot of success for me in terms of how I make money through travel and teaching. I make money through those means. But it's in a strong angular house, which is a good house in astrology. The 1st house is a good house in astrology. The angular houses, 1, 10, 4, 7, and 5, 11 are the good houses in astrology. Now, there's 2 other houses in astrology that a lot of people don't look at. And that's the 5th house. We learned this from Susan Goodell on the podcast, right? Susan Goodell taught us that the 5th house is about speculation and gambling. So if you're speculating about the markets, if you're investing money in the markets and trying to decide,
which do I think is going to go high or low?
We're talking about 5th house matters. So you want to look to your 5th house, the house of good fortune, but also the 11th house, the house of good spirit. Now, what do all of these houses have in common? 2nd, 8, 5, 11. What kind of houses are these? They're the succedent houses. They're the houses that come after the angular houses, that influential, prominent energy of the angular 1, 4, 7, 10 houses. The succeeding houses, what comes after? These are the money houses, 2, 8, 5, 11. Let's keep going. Now, there are 2 planets in astrology that have to deal with economics. So we're talking about, the economy, we're talking about money, when we're talking about trying to determine the market, there's 2 planets we really want to pay attention to in terms of cycles. And Neptune is a big one for the collective, and overall, like Neptune and Aries is big with inflation, as we learned with Susan Goodell on the podcast. But there's also 2 planets that also have to deal with our money, and that is Jupiter and Saturn. And wherever they're placed in the chart, and also the houses that they rule, are going to be really important in terms of understanding our money story. So as an example, right, Jupiter rules my second house of income. Now, Jupiter is trining Saturn. So this can indicate that I hold my money. I'm not recklessly trading or even just trading a lot, spending, saving. It actually shows I'm a little bit more cautious in terms of investing and holding. Now, I also have Saturn trining my ascendant. Saturn is a big economic planet, right? And so Saturn trining my ascendant can indicate that holding long-term things is really helpful for me personally, like real estate, not selling and flipping houses, but actually buying and investing in land, home, property, and holding it for a very long time. Now let's try to go a little bit deeper. Well, we want to look to the aspects. The aspects are very simply the relationships between planets. So I have Mercury squaring my Saturn. Now Saturn's a big economic planet. So this can indicate I'm a little bit more cautious and restricted when it comes to investing my money in the markets. With Mercury, the planet of trade and markets and coin and commerce in the 8th house, which is a big investing house, the fact that it's squaring my Saturn in the 5th house of speculating and gambling can show that I'm a lot more cautious than maybe someone else. So this is just a little quick example of how aspects and knowing where Saturn, Jupiter, and Mercury are in your chart and their story that they're telling can give you more information about your personal economic story. Let's keep going. We got a lot to see in Edinburgh here. Also some surprising things to see in your birth chart to indicate a desire for trading. Vesta, an asteroid that is often connected to traders or trading. For instance, let's say you have Vesta on the ascendant, your identity. Or perhaps you have Vesta, the asteroid, on your descendant, which has to deal with learning, investing, or finances from other people, your one-on-one connections. For instance, I have Vesta right on my descendant, and I love learning financial astrology one-on-one through private communication with people, and public too, like my podcast we had here, the podcast episode with Susan Goodell. I love learning this information from others. So notice if you have a prominent Vesta on the angles or conjunct any planets. There's a couple other planets we really need to pay attention to. Now let's say we want to invest in a particular commodity or a company. Well, we need to look at the synastry, the relationship compatibility between you and the company. This is called the first trade chart, when the company went public. Now, if we have any sun-moon synastry going on, that's a really good sign. When we have our sun or moon connected to a business chart, then it can show strong compatibility with that business that we're about to invest in. There are some planets we want to be a little bit more cautious of, for instance, like Neptune. Neptune can show us more loss or finances dissolving. Or let's take, for instance, Uranus, or even more, Mars and Uranus together. These planets can show that we'd make a lot of impulsive decisions or reckless decisions that are not based on any evidence or proof or research, but rather we're being a little flippant or being a little bit impulsive with our decisions. Now, when it comes to Saturn, Saturn is quite simple. When we think of Saturn, we think of restriction, limitation, and that's what Saturn represents in the synastry between us and a company. Our ability to manage risk, limitation, restriction, holding money, holding a financial investment long term. So if you've got any Saturn placements like we talked about earlier, Saturn aspects to your ascendant or the ruler of your finances or your Mercury, your Jupiter, right? We're gonna be seeing more themes around holding. I'd love to hear from you down below in the comments. Do you have a prominent Saturn, any strong aspects to these planets? Do you like to hodl or hold your investments? Or are you more open to trading? Maybe you got a strong Mars or Uranus themes. Some things to look at in the chart. Let's keep going. Now you might be wondering,
But Helena, what about the future?
well, we got Neptune and Aries, so inflation is bound to happen. War is most likely on the table. Now, this is not fear-mongering, although a lot of you like to think that, and it's not. We predictive astrologers are here to be messengers for the people. And so, yeah, with a combination of war and inflation and oil crisis things, we're going to see some weird movement happening in the financial system. Now, What is the future? Well, we're in the air economy, as Susan Goodell said on our podcast. This is because Pluto's in Aquarius. Pluto represents a generational theme, and Aquarius is innovation and technology. We also have Uranus and Gemini, which is education, travel, transportation, learning, more air-type things. So we're going to be seeing a lot more people investing in air-type things, like technologies, IPs, URLs, and trademarks, and perhaps owning pieces of companies that are more technologically based. Some things we can predict. Some things we may expect over the coming years. And again, we are preparing for 2032. I'm just telling you right now, we're preparing for 2032. 2032, 2032. I'm going to say it again. 2032. Oh, we got a filming crew here.
My Leo moon needs to be involved.
No, I'm just kidding.
We got a seagull friend! We got a seagull friend here. Look how cute he is.
Wow, this is a real life Harry Potter town. I'm pretty sure that Harry Potter and Hogwarts was inspired by the beautiful universities and castles here in Edinburgh. It just feels magical all around. I've been here 3 times, and each time I'm here, I'm like, gosh, this place is so magical. If you haven't visited Edinburgh, Scotland, you've got to. But of course, check your astrocartography map first. You know the drill.